This is the Prophecy Project. Understanding the times, the nations in military conflicts, with Bible teacher and author Alan Bonk.
Welcome to session number 7 of the Prophecy Project. Last session, I covered Revelation chapter 18, the judgment of the great whore. We looked and saw the whore of Babylon, Mega Babylon, judged by fire. Every possible aspect of life in Babylon was mentioned and totally destroyed. The term "no more at all" was used over and over again to show us the complete destruction of a nation. In modern terms that we can all understand and relate to, it would mean no more NFL football, no more Super Bowls, no more internet, no more text messaging, no more electric lighting, microwave ovens, only darkness. No TV, no more reality shows, no more advertisements telling us how unlimited our potential is and how bright our futures will be. No more politicians telling us that their policies will bring prosperity and safety. No one to tell us that sin is an antiquated concept from a bygone time. Babylon has fallen, never to rise or to be inhabited again. The merchants of the earth will weep and wail because no one buys our merchandise anymore. Only those who have come out of her by refusing to be part of her sins will be delivered from her. We are told that those who survive the initial attack and the destruction of the cities will face an army of Iranians, Medes, and who will slaughter everyone they find. They will have no mercy. And surely, this will be a nuclear battle in scope. Those bright arrows will destroy cities. I apologize for being so graphic in my descriptions, but if you've ever seen pictures of Dresden, Germany, during and after the Allied bombing raids of World War II, you know how horrific being destroyed by fire can be. The daughter of Babylon will be so much worse. It states that the earth will literally be shaken at the time of the fall of Babylon. And we were told that God would have healed her, but she would not. As it is, she partied like Sodom and Gomorrah to the bitter end. In this session, we move on to Ezekiel 17. This is where we find the riddle. I want to define what a riddle is before we read the account. A riddle is a mystery which is to be solved. You're actually asked to be solved. So you, the reader, should solve it. You are invited to solve this case. The subject of the parable in this case is the house of Israel, the nation of Israel. The term parable is also used in this account. A parable is a story which assists in solving a mystery. It'll help you. It is usually done through symbols and double meanings. I want to read the first 10 verses of the chapter, which define the riddle, and then come back and comment on them afterwards. Ezekiel 17, verse 1. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, verse 2, Son of man, put forth a riddle, and speak a parable unto the house of Israel. Verse 3, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, a great eagle with great wings, long-winged, full of feathers, which had divers colors, came unto Lebanon, and took the highest branch of the cedar. Verse 4, he cropped off the top of his young twigs, and carried it into a land of traffic. He set it in a city of merchants. Verse 5, he took also the seed of the land, and planted it in a fruitful field. He placed it by great waters, and set it as a willow tree. And it grew, and became a spreading vine of low stature, whose branches turned towards him. And the roots thereof were under him, so that it became a vine, and brought forth branches, and shot forth sprigs. Verse 7, there was also another great eagle, with great wings, many feathers, And behold, this vine did bend her roots towards him, and shot forth her branches towards him, that it might be watered by the furrows of her plantation. Verse 8. It was planted in a goodly soil by great waters, that it might bring forth branches, and that it might bear fruit, that it might be a goodly vine. Say thou, thus saith the Lord God, say, shall it prosper? Shall he not pull it up by the roots thereof, and cut off the fruit thereof, that it wither? It shall wither, and all the leaves of her spring, even without great power or many people to pluck it up by the roots thereof. Verse 10, yea, being planted, shall it prosper. Shall it not utterly wither when the east wind toucheth it? It shall wither in the furrows where it grew. This is the full parable. It ends with the withering of the goodly vine in the furrows of the second great eagle. I want to expound on these 10 verses and diagram it, because I like to show things and keep them straight. When you get these types of things together, it's hard to keep it all straight. Verse 1, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, put forth a riddle, and speak a parable unto the house of Israel. The riddle, or the mystery, is given from God, from the Lord. It is not to be taken lightly. If God speaks something, then we should listen and take it seriously. The riddle is addressed to the house of Israel. This riddle is presented in parable form. Verse 3, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, a great eagle with great wings, long-winged, full of feathers, which had divers colors, came into Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar. Here we are introduced to the great eagle, and that it is a very special eagle. From its feathers, from their color to the length of its wings, it has the ability to take the highest branches of the cedar. It is militarily superior to the cedar. Verse 4, he, the eagle, cropped off the top of his young twigs and carried them into a land of traffic, a land of business. He set it in a city of merchants, and he took also the seed of the land and planted it in a fruitful field. He placed it by great waters, and it was set as a willow tree. The city is not a bad place to be put. When they are taken out and put there, it's a pretty good place. It could have been a dry, uninhabited wilderness, but it actually is a fruitful field, a city full of opportunities of people, great waters, who are also told that they didn't take just the top twigs, just a few people, but took people, the general population, the seed of the land. It was to be a tree, although not a cedar tree, but still a tree. The willow speaks of submission, humility, and weeping. Verse 6. And it grew and became a spreading vine of low stature, whose branches turned towards him, and the roots thereof were under him, so that it became a vine, and brought forth branches, and shot forth sprigs. And it grew, and it became a vine of low stature. It was within the eagle, and yet it grew, and brought forth branches and shoots. It appears that the cedar was in that eagle for quite some time. It wasn't just a vacation or a short interlude. They were there long enough to really begin to become a society. Verse 7, there was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers, and behold, this vine did bend her roots towards him, and shot forth her branches towards him, that he might water it by the furrows of her plantation. Verse 8, it was planted in a goodly soil by great waters, that it might bring forth branches, that it might be a goodly vine. This second great eagle is not the first. It says that the vine chooses to bend her towards him, and is not cropped off or taken like it was in the first eagle, but plants itself in the furrows within the second great eagle. It was their choice to go there. This is a good place, great waters, lots of peoples from other nations. The second eagle is similar to the first, with its description of wings, feathers, and colors. This is a displacement for the vine. It actually leaves and goes there. The vine's low stature is transformed in the second eagle. It becomes a goodly vine. The word goodly means great in stature. And the word for vine can also mean tree. It literally can be interpreted either way. I believe that she became a great tree in the second Babylon. Verse 9, say thou, thus saith the Lord God, shall it prosper? Shall he not pull up the roots thereof, and cut off the fruit thereof, that it wither? It shall wither, and all the leaves of her spring, even without great power or many people to pluck it up by the roots thereof. Verse 10 says, yea, behold, being planted, shall it prosper? ? Shall it not utterly wither? When the east wind toucheth it, it shall wither in the furrows where it grew. The Lord asks, shall it prosper, or shall it continue to prosper unabated? And he says no. They are going to wither right in the furrows, right where she has planted herself. And it won't happen because there's a great and powerful people come from some other nation or does something, but it comes because God begins to blow an east wind on her. The east wind is symbolic of the hand of God, and specifically judgment. Now, I want to go over this diagram at this time and make sure that you see what's on it. First of all, up in the left-hand corner of the diagram is the first great eagle. It's over the top of the cedar of Lebanon, and it has cropped off the top of that tree and planted it as a vine of low stature in a land of traffic by great waters. That vine then begins to grow, and at some point it bends its bow and its roots over into a second great eagle, which we see up above. And under that great eagle, it plants itself in the furrows of that great eagle, and it becomes a great tree or a goodly tree. It is that tree that begins to wither because of an east wind that blows on it, and it withers in the furrows where it grew, which is the second eagle. Now, we know very little about the definitions. We know a lot about the riddle. But God does not leave the matter at that point. He continues to begin to define much of the symbolism and identities. Verse 11, moreover, the word of the Lord came unto me, Ezekiel, saying, verse 12, say now to this rebellious house, know ye not what these things mean? Tell them, behold, the king of Babylon is come to Jerusalem, and he hath taken the king of Israel thereof, and the princes thereof, and led them into Babylon, and hath taken the king's seed, and made a covenant with him, and hath taken an oath of the king of Israel, that he hath taken and also taken the mighty of the land, that the kingdom Israel might be base, that it might not lift itself up, but by keeping of his covenant it might stand or continue. Now, we know more about this than we did. We now know that Israel's rebellion is the cause for the event, the captivity, and that Lebanon is actually Jerusalem. This is an example of how God calls one location by someone else's name, as seen in Revelation chapter 11 earlier in our sessions. I believe that God uses the cedar to represent Israel because the cedars of Lebanon are renowned for their strength and beauty, and this reflects how God desires Israel to be. We also know that the land of traffic is the land of Babylon. The first great eagle is Babylon. The king of Israel was required to make an oath to the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, that he would submit to him and not rebel while he's there, and that Israel as a nation would be allowed to continue to exist, although as a base nation, a willow tree. Verse 15, but he rebelled against him, sending his ambassadors into Egypt, that they might give him horses and much people. Shall it prosper? Shall he escape that doeth such things? Or shall he break the covenant and be delivered? As I live, saith the Lord God, surely in this place where the king dwelleth that made him king, whose oath he despised, whose covenant he brake, even with him in the midst of Babylon shall he die. The king of Israel will die in Babylon. These two verses tell us that the king of Israel will not uphold his oath. And God says there is no deliverance for a man who does such things, and that he will die in Babylon. The next 4 verses describe events pertaining to the breaking of that oath and how serious it is in God's sight and the situation. But no direct information about the riddle is seen. So I'm going to skip over into verse 22. God begins to speak to the final events concerning the cedar, Israel, and how these events will sequence. Verse 22. Thus saith the Lord God, I will take of the highest branch of the high cedar, Israel, and will set it. I will crop off the top of his young twigs a tender one, and will plant it upon a high mountain and eminent. In the mountain of the height of Israel will I plant it, and it will bring forth boughs and bear fruit, and be a goodly cedar, a great tree. And under it shall dwell all the fowl of every wing. In the shadow of the branches thereof shall they dwell. We are told that God will cause the goodly tree to wither by blowing an east wind on it. But he also crops off the top of the branches a tender twig, and he plants it back in the high mountains of Israel, the land of Israel today. There it will prosper and become a great tree again, become a great nation. Remember, they, Israel, were in the furrows where they were planted, the second Babylon. So this is all going to happen in the second Babylon, not the first. It is a land that they had immigrated to by their own choice, their own desire, which they will go back from there to the land of Israel. All the trees, verse 24, all the trees of the field shall know that I, the Lord, have brought down the high tree, which is historic Israel, exalted the low tree, which is the low vine that began to grow in the first Babylon, have dried up the green tree, which is the east wind and the second eagle, and made the dry tree, once it's drying up, to flourish. And that is back in the land of Israel. I, the Lord, have brought down the high tree, have exalted the low tree, have made the dry tree to flourish, and this is what I have done. I, the Lord, have spoken and have done it. God repeats the sequence twice in this verse because it is key to placing the second great eagle. I want to review the diagram again with knowing the things that we now know. Up in the upper left-hand corner, we have the first great eagle. But now we can place Babylon's Nebuchadnezzar there. So now we know where this all started. The cedar down below isn't just part of Lebanon, but it is Israel. And the vine of low stature, in verse 21, it says, those that remain shall be scattered abroad towards the winds. That's the Jewish diaspora from out of Israel and into Babylon. They go to the furrows of the great tree, where God's east wind. Now we know this is really the hand of God. And from there, they're taken into the mountains of Israel. God has shown us everything except the identity of the second great eagle. The identity of the second great eagle is the mystery. This is a riddle after all. And what kind of riddle would it be if you told them everything? All else is explained. We do know that the first eagle was Babylon, and the second great eagle has the same attributes as the first, but is not the same geographic location, but in every other way is just like Babylon. So we are looking for a nation who is symbolized by a great eagle, which is a land of merchants and great waters, many peoples. and that will become a home to a large number of Jewish immigrants, which have or are prospering there. This eagle will exist at the end of time, at the time that Israel becomes a nation back in their land, because they cut off the top of the tree. This was established in 1948. I believe that America fits the description perfectly. When Revelation 17 says mystery, Babylon the Great, it's tying itself directly back to the mystery that God had in Ezekiel in this riddle. Babylon is the eagle. I want to close this session at this time, but we will go through American symbolism and history in the next session and assemble a complete list for end-time Babylon. Thank you.
This was only one session of many. Be sure to continue watching the Prophecy Project series. If you would like to read more information on this subject, you can find Alan's books on Amazon.com.